Good morning. Oh, wow. It's quiet quick. Executive Director Renew, will you please call the roll?
Regent Bailey. Regent Bradley. Regent Drew. Regent Evers.
I'm here.
Regent Sabo.
Here.
Regent Farrow.
Here.
Regent Higgins.
Here.
Regent Rybar. Regent Landis.
Here.
Regent Menteith.
Here.
Regent Milner. Here. Regent Mueller.
Here.
Regent Peterson.
Here.
Regent Pruitt. Regent Roberts. Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh. Regent Whitburn. We have a quorum.
Barely. Okay, thank you. The minutes of the March 6th, 2014 Board of Regents meeting have been provided. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I learned yesterday that you have to ask for opposed or it's not an official vote.
Well,
Did you all know that? Just so you all know that.
what about those all official votes we didn't officially vote?
Well, nobody knows.
We never did.
It's implied.
The reports of the Hospital Authority Board, Higher Education Aids Board, and Wisconsin Technical College System Board have been provided. Are there any comments or questions? Okay. New Regents. Spring is our annual changing of the guard, and we will soon be saying farewell to 4 of our board colleagues. Regent John Drew, Regent Tracy Rybar, Chad Landis, and Gary Roberts. It's been a privilege to work with all of them, even though only one of them's here. And we'll be saying more about that in our meeting in June. You all know there's no escape from all the whereases that we'll be throwing at you. But the other side of the departures, of course, is that we'll welcome in the new Governor Walker has announced his new appointments, and they are Jose Delgado of Brookfield, who's the retired President and Chief Executive Officer of American Transmission Company, Eve Hall of New Berlin, President of the African American Chamber of Commerce, Nicholas Harsey of Madison, a junior mechanical engineering major at UW-Madison. Nicholas, who spent 5 years in the Marine Corps, has been appointed as a non-traditional student to succeed Tracy Rybar. And Annika Perath of Mount Pleasant, a sophomore political science major at UW-La Crosse. Annika will serve the remaining year of Chad's term as our traditional student representative. Chad did a bad thing to us. He graduated. I'm also pleased to report that all 4 were unanimously confirmed last week. So that's the process was very efficient this time around. Regents Delgado, Hall, Harsey, and Perath will be at our Milwaukee meeting, and so we will have more complete introductions at that time. Search updates. I'll have some very brief updates for you on several of our ongoing searches. First, the Chancellor searches. At our last meeting, I reported that the Search and Screen Committee at UW Stout and Green Bay have been officially charged. And some of you may have noticed that our Chancellor from Green Bay is smiling all the time. And if you ask him, he doesn't know why, but he just can't stop.
I break out into laughter.
As of last week, we can add UW-Oshkosh to the list of committees that have been charged. Later this month, President Cross will charge the Search and Screen Committee at UW Colleges and Extensions to set that search in motion. And finally, we are in the very early stages of finding a successor to UW-Milwaukee Chancellor Mike Lovell, with the call for nominations to the Search Committee going out. Actually, they have gone out. So that process of naming the Search and Screen Committee has started. Also, Ray has been working very hard on finding an interim chancellor for Milwaukee, and hopefully, if things go well, we'll have an announcement week after next of who that interim chancellor will be. On another front, we've decided to reboot our search for a chief audit executive. A renewed search and screen initiative has been launched to identify additional finalists, and the committee will be chaired by Regent Jan Mueller. Thank you, Jan. There's also some search news in the UW system administration, but I will let President Cross share that in his report. Funding allocation work group. At our last meeting, we had a request for an update on the status of the funding allocation work group, which was appointed by President Riley to review the current method used to allocate state general purpose revenue and tuition. I've asked Regent Mueller to bring us up to speed on that group's progress. Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate this opportunity to share with you the work of this funding allocation work group. I serve on the work group with Regent Higgins, and along with, we have 5 chancellors, 3 vice chancellors, and interim Vice President Steve Wildeck also serves on that group. I should also mention that the chair of the group is Mark Buer, and we are very fortunate to have a man of his caliber and experience to guide us in this effort. It's remarkable that he's been willing to donate his time and energy to this, and I have to publicly thank him. Last December, the group was charged with reviewing the methodology to allocate GPR, general purpose revenue, and tuition among the UW institutions. We were asked to determine if changes are needed, and if so, to develop alternatives for consideration by the system president, the chancellors, and subsequently by the board. And we have had 3 meetings thus far. I would characterize them as informative and constructive and somewhat challenging as we work through these issues that we were asked to consider. And again, we're looking at analyzing the existing model, reviewing broad principles upon which funding allocation models are based. We're analyzing alternative resource models, and there are lots of them out there in the country. Exploring the advantages and disadvantages of each. We're looking at how tuition and general purpose revenue fit in state support to the existing methodology and alternatives. And finally and importantly, the model and underlying financial support, how that would be monitored and modified in the future as changes are made. Because we've learned that the most successful funding allocation models have changes over time. Again, the conversations have been difficult but productive, but I am optimistic, and I know that Regent Higgins is also, that we'll have a thoughtful and well-reasoned report to give you in June. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Any of the chancellors that are on that committee want to weigh in? I did meet with Mark Buer last week, and we've been staying together. He's been keeping me informed, and I agree with Regent Mueller that we're fortunate to have him. He's a good leader. Those things sometimes they take on a life, and sometimes you look at what you've done and you say, I'm not sure that we've gotten anywhere yet, and then it kind of comes together, and I think you're heading into the stage where it's going to come together. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Finally, since last we met, I sent Regents a memo that summarizes the various committee priorities and goals. As I indicated, I'd like the committees to prepare brief written reports to document progress towards their goals, and I'm hopeful we will have an opportunity to discuss the status reports at our June meeting. With that, I will turn things over to President Cross.
Thank you, Regent President Felbo. Last month I told you that I was planning to have a listening tour, to be all ears, no hair, to the concerns and ideas and issues important to the people, students, parents, communities, and business leaders, as well as legislators and others throughout the system. I recently spent a couple of days in Milwaukee, where I had the opportunity to meet and listen to a diverse set of stakeholders in our state's major urban center. I met with state and county officials, as well as business, community, and church leaders. Met with Will Allen and Growing Power, and I've known Will Allen for a few years now. Met with the Northside Food Group, the Institute for Urban Agriculture, with representatives from the Medical College, as well as UWAM, UW Extension, and community leaders. I met with area ministers in the Milwaukee area. This drew in our faith-based leaders to discuss what they think are the greatest issues facing their community and how the university might help. Met with Julie Taylor. Julia is president of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. She's doing great work and has already begun to help introduce me to other business leaders that I should be talking with in the Milwaukee region. Met with Chris Abley, the county executive, along with county supervisors, Will Johnson, Gary Brodricks, and Lou. Finally, the listening session in Milwaukee ended with a reception at Steve Adams and Thelma Cias's home. And if you've ever been in their home, it's pretty impressive. Former Mayor Tom Barrett, Mayor Tom Barrett, along with former Regents. It's a little bit preemptive, wasn't it? Presumptive, wasn't it? Former Regent Danae Davis and a tremendous group of leaders were there. Vicki Washington and Jen were from the system as well. And last week I was at UW Parkside. The Letters and Sciences Dean's Council was meeting there. I had a great opportunity to listen to their issues firsthand. Also had some time to tour the facility and meet with Chancellor Ford and her staff. Always an enjoyable experience. We also continue to be busy interacting with the legislature and the governor's office, even as the legislative session wound down. Regents, chancellors, and key leaders have been actively engaged in good dialogue and raising awareness about key issues important to the UW, whether on specific legislation or more generally in continuing relationship development. I've been talking about finances, some of the things we're talking about during this meeting, just like we did yesterday, and some of the tools we're developing. I've also been discussing the continuing need to move forward with UPS and HRD and the possibility of a joint committee on employment relations taking the issue up sooner rather than later. I think that's progressing very well. This is very important. If we can get the legislature to schedule a meeting on UPS, this would mean a great deal to our employees. And I'm committed to getting UPS passed. And I'm going to try and do, to do this before our faculty, staff, and students go home for the summer. So stay tuned. Here are a few of the folks I've met with recently: Speaker Voss, Minority Leader Barca, Representative Nass, Ballweg, Jorgensen, Markline, Kirkman, Sargent, Senate President Ellis, Minority Leader Larson, Senators Coles, Gudex, Petrowski, Darling, Harsdorf, Cullen, Farrow, Jauk, Miller, and Schilling. I'm also working closely with our educational partners. I've met with WTCS President Morna Foy, DPI Superintendent Tony Evers, and WACU President Ralph Uganke, and I will continue to do so. I had a great opportunity to speak with students at Posters in the Rotunda. If you've never been there, that is really a fun event, as well as the 4-H Centennial celebration in the Capitol, which is also a fun group of students to be with. Tomorrow I've been invited to get together with the student representatives from all across the UW system as part of one of their regular meetings. I expect to have it will be a great forum to exchange ideas and thoughts with students. With students with wide-ranging interests, you never quite know what to expect, but that's why I like engaging students. I think Regent Milner and Regent Landis will also be attending, and perhaps new Regent Annika Perath will be there as well. I met with business and community leaders in Milwaukee, and I'm also connecting with some of the state's leading industry folks as well. Eric Borgading with the Hospital Association, Mike Thiel with the Realtors, and I can assure you there's a great deal of enthusiasm for a partnership with many of these folks, and I'm excited about that. With respect to a federal update, we know that good federal relations efforts have a powerful impact on the UW system. Currently, about 30%, or close to $1 billion of our overall budget, comes from federal programs. Federal support touches each and every institution and program in the UW system. You will note that in your packets today include UW System's federal priorities for 2014. Chris Andrews is in Washington this week to share it with our federal delegation, their staff, and other stakeholders. As I mentioned in March, I've asked Chris to expand our corporate outreach at the UW System level. Her title has changed to reflect those priorities. She is now Associate VP for Federal and Corporate Relations. Also joining Chris in Washington this week are Cooperative Extension and several members of Wisconsin County boards. They're visiting congressional offices to highlight the work that Cooperative Extension does in all 72 counties in Wisconsin. This work supports agriculture, community, natural resources, and economic development, as well as family living and 4-H programming. Finally, the UW Flex option is also taking the center stage on Capitol Hill. David Scable, Dean of Continuing Ed at Extension, will participate in a panel discussing competency-based education and its implications for federal policy, a hot issue right now. Those expected to attend include representatives from the U.S. Department of Education, the National Governors Association, Inside Higher Ed, the Institute for Higher Education Policy, the Gates Foundation, the College Board, ACE, ASCU, AACSU, SCU, National Student Associations, and members and staff from both the House and Senate. David has been asked to also present at the White House following that to a couple of staff members at the White House. Quite an honor. Looking ahead, President Falbo and I will be journeying to Washington, D.C. in June with Chris for face-to-face meetings with our congressional delegation. We'll share some information on those updates later. As was announced last week, we now have a new Vice President for University Relations. After a 4-month national search, I've appointed Jim Villa to take on this new role. Jim has a 20-year record of building strong teams and creating and creative problem-solving efforts. He has extensive experience working with legislators. We're also getting closer to identifying a new VP for Finance to succeed Debbie Durkin. UW-Whitewater Chancellor Dick Telfer is chairing that search and screen committee, and they will be interviewing semifinalists this next week. We will keep you posted. And now for some news from around the system. A generous gift to UW-Stevens Point will establish the university's first endowed faculty position and enhance one of the nation's largest wildlife management programs. A $2 million gift from Gerald and Helen Stevens honors the memory of their son, Doug Stevens, a 1991 graduate of UW-Stevens Point. The gift will help create the Douglas R. Stevens Chair in Wildlife, a new faculty position in the College of Natural Resources. Dean Christine Thomas and Development Director Steve Menzel were instrumental in securing this gift. We salute them for their good work on behalf of UW-Stevens Point and offer congratulations to Chancellor Patterson and the Pointer community. The UW system has been awarded a $200,000 planning grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The UW system is one of 12 state systems chosen to participate in this grant, and the funding will advance planning to align, integrate, and more effectively implement reform work already underway. The planning grant will begin this spring and conclude in December of 2014. Congratulations to Senior Vice President Mark Nook and Senior Special Assistant Rebecca Karoff for securing the grant and moving it forward. The inaugural Wisconsin Big Idea Tournament, funded by the UW system and supported by WEDC, American Family, and other partners, held its first state finals event at the Pyle Center last week. This innovative program was developed by Eric Stiege of Wisconsin's UW Extension Center for Technology and Commercialization and Mark Lang. The winner of this group this year was a student company called Gription Industries. These students developed a product line to increase maintenance, productivity, and safety for military aircraft. Mark Lang will feature this startup company and others, including Idea Advanced companies, yet to be identified at a READY meeting later this year. I'm pleased to report that UW La Crosse's It Makes Sense financial literacy program has received a 2013 Wisconsin Financial Literacy Award from the Department of Financial Institutions. The program is one of only 13 organizations and 7 individuals recognized for promoting financial literacy at the state capitol in February. Congratulations, Chancellor Gowan. He's not here today. Heidi is here. UW-Eau Claire's newly created first-year writing program was recently honored for its innovation and effectiveness in helping students develop the strong communication skills employers say they value in new college graduates. The Blue Gold Seminar in Critical Reading and Writing has received the Writing Program Certificate of Excellence from the National Conference on College Composition and Communications. Congratulations, Chancellor Schmidt. At UW-Stout, the first floor lab in the Robert S. Swanson Library and Learning Center will offer video games on one of 4 retro-style TV sets. You've got to wonder where this is going, right? The lab is also an applied learning and creative space where students and professors can do research on and teach about all things video game related. This is a space designed to do more than play, said Andrew Williams, assistant professor in the School of Art and Design. When we talk about new educational mediums, this is an example of thinking outside the box. I agree. A UW-Milwaukee astronomer is about to take a ride aboard a NASA aircraft. Gene Creighton, the director of UWM's Manfred Olson Planetarium, will be a passenger this spring on Sophia as it flies 45,000 feet into the stratosphere. That's NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy. Gene will join educators from 10 other states on this flight. Sophia is a specially designed Boeing 747 equipped with a 100-foot telescope, which Gene calls the largest flying astronomical observatory in the world. The trip will help astronomers learn more about how galaxies were born. Congratulations. I envy her. UW-Platteville and Madison College will be collaborating to produce a protein used in the growth of stem cells. UW-Platteville biology professor Estra Ofalu received a Pioneer Academic Center for Community Engagement grant for her class to produce the proteins which Madison College needs. The UW-Platteville students will produce an alternative to mouse cells, which have been used previously. In sporting news, I'd also like to say congratulations to Coach Bo Ryan and the Wisconsin Badgers men's basketball team. They provided us with some thrilling action over the last few weeks. I'm especially fond of Coach Ryan and his commitment to developing character in the young men he coaches. He's the kind of coach you would want your son or daughter to play for. He really is. Speaking of sporting success, congratulations also to the UW-Whitewater men's basketball team, winners of the Division III national title for the second time in 3 years. And the women's basketball team made it to the Final Four. And that's not all. The Warhawks gymnastics team also won the national championship in the National Collegiate Gymnastics Association title for the 3rd straight year. UW-Parkside student video producer Justin Helm recently earned an internship with the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers were so impressed with Justin's ability that the team nominated him to attend the Major League Baseball Diversity Business Summit in New York this month, which also happens to be the premier sports employment conference and supplier diversity trade fair. Baseball in the spring. It just doesn't get any better than that, does it? Finally, I was very impressed last month, as I'm sure most of you were, with the student presentations made at our last meeting. The only thing that could have made it better is if I was allowed to fly the drone, but that wasn't going to happen. We heard several fascinating stories of student success yesterday as well as part of Chancellor Van Galen's presentation, which was excellent, by the way. So as part of my regular reports to the board, I'm starting a new feature. We'll call it Student Spotlight, focusing on the core of why we're here. The young man I've asked to join us here today has quite a story. I'm pleased to be able to share some of it, but I should note that while this young man's story is extraordinary, it is not unusual. When it comes to excellence among our UW students, there are many students like David, with their own unique experiences and examples of excellence. So in the coming months, I'm hoping to turn the spotlight on some of these students and their stories. Today, I'm pleased to introduce David Pillman. Finishing up his sophomore year here at UW River Falls, David was born in Ecuador, where his parents were serving as missionaries for the Lutheran Church. At age 3, David and his family moved to Canada. Come on up, David. His mother is from Canada. He spent the next 6 years moving between Canada and Minnesota. At age 9, his family moved to Menominee, Wisconsin, where he began helping out at a strawberry farm. David was homeschooled and graduated with his high school degree in 2005. He began studying music at a Bible school in Minneapolis. After 2 years, he left school and joined the Marines. He did 3 tours. The first was at Guantanamo Bay. His second tour was in the Middle East, working security and training foreign nationals from Iraq, Kuwait, Pakistan, Jordan, Bahrain. For his third tour, David switched from security to regular infantry and served in Afghanistan from 2011 to 2012. He left the Marines and began attending classes at UW-RF in the fall of 2012. He's an animal science major and pre-vet as well, and would like to attend veterinary school in Wisconsin. Take note, Chad. David is president of the Navigator Club and plays on the rugby team here. Now that's real sport, right? Yeah. As if that's not enough, in January he purchased the 40-acre strawberry farm he'd been working at since age 9. And he is collaborating with Dr. Brian Smith, a professor of horticulture here at River Falls, on the development of a new breed of strawberries. The testing of these new berries is taking place on the RF campus. Now, here to tell us more, please join me in welcoming David Pillman.
Thank you so much for that introduction, President Cross. It's really a privilege to come here and talk to you and share a little bit more of my story. As was stated at the start, after being born in Ecuador, South America, we came back to Minnesota, my family and I, when I was 3 years old. And as soon as we came back, we started a tradition. We'd go up north to my mom's family in Canada during the summertime, and then we'd come all the way down south to Minnesota for the winter. So, you know what? I felt right at home this winter. When I was 7 years old, I moved to Menominee, Wisconsin, and that is where I graduated high school. As was stated earlier, I was homeschooled and graduated there. After 2 years at the Bible College, I then went to join the Marine Corps in 2007. While in the Marine Corps, when I was here in stateside, my primary job was actually being a shooting instructor. And so that was one of my great joys while in there. What caused me to be interested in animal science and wanting to get into veterinary medicine was a couple things. Growing up in Wisconsin, I grew up around dairy farms and worked on dairy farms as well as strawberry farms. And it became I really enjoyed helping the animals when they were suffering the most. I also, in Afghanistan, worked a lot with the local nationals on a security team with my colonel, and we traveled around a lot, and they would always bring their animals that got possibly hit by IEDs or injured in other ways to us and ask us to help because we had medical supplies that they did not. And most of the time, we didn't have a clue we couldn't do anything. We'd wrap some gauze around it, and the camel would run off because they were scared of us, but we couldn't actually treat them. So it kind of raised that interest. I really wanted to be able to help these animals and serve here in Wisconsin with dairy industry, but also possibly look at serving overseas with countries that need help with animal husbandry and things like that. Since coming here, I'd like to cover a few of the adjustments, like what is it like being a student that was in the military and now coming to a university. One of the first main adjustments is I have to decide what I wear every morning. So I have to figure out what I'm going to wear. I can't just wear what someone else tells me. And then make sure, leave my gun at home. I don't need to carry that anymore. Also, the other thing is I was a very active lifestyle in the Marine Corps Infantry. And that's been a bit of an adjustment for me, too. I have to sit through class now. I have to find ways to use that energy. Rugby was one great means I found. But also, I looked around and found local gyms that were able to be open when I could go to them before class so I could get rid of my energy and sit through class. Another important adjustment that I had was trying to figure out my veteran benefits. That's a huge issue. They're great benefits we have here in Wisconsin and from the national government. But for me, it was a very challenge coming here, not knowing anything. I didn't know a thing about the benefits when I got out of the military. And then sitting through orientation and trying to understand them. There wasn't really much about it during orientation, but I'm happy to say I work with the Veteran Services Office here, and Sharon Seidel, the head of the Veteran Services Office, is preparing a special orientation for veterans next fall, which I'm hoping to help take part in and help be able to share what services are there in a special orientation, because it's a completely different picture coming as a veteran versus coming as someone straight out of high school. Also, as was mentioned before, what really brought me to River Falls. River Falls was a campus that was small that I could connect to the community. There's a very strong community here and a farm community. And with animal science interest and veterinary interest, River Falls fit right into that plan that I had. The strawberry farm. This was an opportunity that was presented to me about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right after I got out of the Marine Corps. The owner of the farm came up to me and was like, he wanted to retire and was like, would you be interested in buying it? I talked it over with Dr. Brian Smith. I had horticulture class with him and had actually worked with him before I joined the Marine Corps with different issues we had on the farm when I just worked there. And he was able to help me decide on, properly pricing the assets I was buying, as well as looking at new varieties, including one that I'm planting next year, that will help the overall production of the farm. The farm itself is 10 acres. I have 10 acres of strawberries that we'll be producing next year, and it's 40 acres in total, but only 10 acres of strawberries producing. And so it's a challenge sometimes balancing work, school, but what I find is I basically bought myself a summer job. Strawberries sleep all winter, and then spring comes out. Actually, this Saturday, I'll be out there raking off the straw and getting them ready to produce. And that's kind of looking on to my future goals. As was mentioned by President Cross, I would appreciate, or I'm looking forward to applying to UW-Madison. First off, 3+1 program that UW River Falls offers here. So this fall, I will be hopefully applying to Madison, and then apply to other colleges as well. But for me, with especially veteran benefits, Madison would be my first choice. And with that, it still gives me the opportunity to either attend to Madison, but still come back in the summer and spend summers here in Wisconsin running the strawberry farm and selling selling strawberries in Hudson, Menominee, and Eau Claire. So any of you want any strawberries, look for us in June or July. Thank you very much, President Cross.
Thank you. For a Marine, he's all right. Thank you, David, and we wish you much success. Mike had to step out for a second.
But I can take up from him. I'd like to call now on Regent Bradley to present a report of the actions taken by the Education Committee. Regent Bradley.
Thank you, Vice President Pilgrim. You have the written report of the Education Committee as of last night. First of all, we removed one item from our agenda, 11E, because Senior Vice President Mark Nook was unable to attend the committee meeting. Among our responsibilities, one of the most important ones is ensuring that students throughout the system are provided with a high-quality, diverse array of academic programs while minimizing unnecessary duplication. This is an area that I have found in my experience as a regent that is surrounded by assumptions made by parents, students, certainly by legislators, and some myths. And I think the myths need to be replaced by the facts. And I would suggest, so that we could be accurate advocates of what is going on with our array of programs throughout the system, that every regent familiarize himself or herself with the slide presentation that Associate Vice President Stephen Collison presented to the Education Committee. He explained that while new programs indeed are added every year, programs are eliminated as well. And if you sit on the Board of Regents, you often hear, because we approve the additions, and we don't have our attention drawn enough, in my view, to the deletions. I mean, there are important decisions that are made collaboratively by representatives of the institutions and system staff to really manage this. It just doesn't happen. And the facts are that it's really managed quite well. So, for example, in the last 5 years, there indeed were 80 new programs added to the system array, but there were also 48 programs that were deleted or suspended. So in a 5-year period, there was only a net gain of 32 programs. What about duplication? And I think this is probably one of our biggest system myths, especially among people outside the university who just look at our size. Well, let's look at the duplication issue. 58% of all undergraduate degree programs are offered by no more than one institution. In fact, there's only one academic program, only one, that is offered by all institutions in our system, and that's a bachelor's degree in psychology. And the data shows that there happens to be ample demand for that psychology degree. So the duplication, beyond that amazing 58% figure, if you look at Dr. Collison's data, it really is very, very minor. So how do we compare with other public systems? Well, the total array of our academic programs consists of about 1,200. And this happens to be lower than the total number of academic programs that were offered at the time of merger. And it is also, if you compare apples to apples, it is at or below the number of programs that are offered in public institutions in Minnesota and Illinois and Michigan. And if you look at us nationally in large systems, we compare very, very well. And I want to repeat, this just doesn't happen. This is a result of good management, and it's the result of people throughout our system taking seriously the responsibility to provide adequate program offerings, but at the same time avoiding duplication and doing this in the way to hold down costs to the citizens of the state. We heard a presentation from UW River Falls Provost Fernando Delgado. He spoke on non-traditional students and building new partnerships at UW River Falls, which is really an amazing success story. And here again, we know that this stuff just doesn't happen. It happens because of leadership, because of vision, and a lot of really talented people making it happen, especially not only on the home campus, but also at the Hudson Center. I'd like to turn to our action items. We unanimously approved the following resolutions, which I move adoption. 11A2, authorizing implementation of the Bachelor of Science in Physical Education at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Part 3, authorizing the implementation of a Master's in Science in Computer Science at the University of Wisconsin-River Falls. Part 4, authorizing the implementation of Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. And Part 5, approving the annual request to the trustees of the William F. Vilas Trust Estate for $7.1 million for the fiscal year 2014-15, which would be used not only for scholarships, but also for fellowships and professorships and special programs in the arts, the humanities, social sciences, and music. We also unanimously approved 2 of the resolutions relating to UW-Milwaukee and its charter school contracts. One was authorizing the Milwaukee College Preparatory School North Campus, effective July 1 of this year. Another was authorizing a single contract for 3 Seeds of Health Incorporated schools under one contract, also effective July 1. This puts into one contract the Seeds of Health Elementary School, the Tenor High School, and the Veritas High School. We learned, by the way, that the head of Seeds of Health Incorporated happens to be the sister of former Regent President Michael Spector. I also move 2 resolutions for approval by the full board, which the committee approved by majority vote. And this happens, one of them deals with the Urban Day School. There was some discussion on this request for renewal of the UW-Milwaukee Charter for Urban Day School. And our resolution, which now appears as 11F, reads as follows, that authorizing the renewal of the Urban Day School contract for 4 years instead of the customary 5, effective July 1, subject, however, to the submission of a UW-Milwaukee Charter School evaluation report at the end of the 2015-16 school year. So the UW-Milwaukee Charter Schools office's evaluation report on the Urban Day School, which was presented to us, will receive another report in 2 years to determine whether there's been any improvement in the performance over that 2-year period. I should point out that if there is not improvement and the board feels that this contract should not be continued, that UW-Milwaukee has the authority under the contract to terminate it at any time. So, Region President Falbo, that concludes my report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Can I have 11F be separated?
Yes.
That's the Urban Day one.
If you could just do it on request. Okay, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and on 11F? Tony?
I just wanted to separate so I could vote against.
I'll move 11F.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I thought that the statistics in the report, your working papers that we were given, were very interesting, comparing all of the demographics of the population, that are part of that school. I really appreciated that information for all of us to have.
Good.
Any other comments?
I just felt that they should have been terminated. That's
Okay.
the reason I want to vote no.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
2 oppositions. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I will now call upon Regent Higgins to present his report on the Research, Economic Development, and Innovation Committee.
Thank you, President Falbo. The Ready Committee heard 4 presentations at our meeting yesterday. The first presentation by Dr. Barbara Benny, Associate Professor of Mathematics at UW-La Crosse, provided an update on the Economic Development Incentive Grant project. The UW-La Crosse grant is the smallest of the 12 grants that were selected as part of the Economic Development Incentive Grant program and received $126,248. The grant will allow the program to extend its support services to businesses across the region and to expand student work experience and internship opportunities. The second presentation was by Regent Rybar and focused on the LEAP Education Business Compact. LEAP stands for an initiative titled Liberal Education in America's Promise, and it focuses on making high-quality learning a national priority as employers increasingly seek college graduates with a broad set of critical thinking, leadership, and knowledge skills to help fuel the innovation-driven economy. Regent Rybar is the first state business owner to sign the LEAP Compact. Signers commit to advocating for students who have hands-on experience with business. A UW Whitewater alumna and Harley-Davidson executive has become the second signer. I led the third discussion, which focused on revisiting the READY Committee's strategic goals and performance milestones. We are on track or ahead of schedule on each of the programs supporting our goals. To date, the plan has led to the implementation of the 2013-2015 Economic Development Incentive Grants and the recapitalization of WISIS. This has generated matching grants and in-kind contributions from nearly $4.5 million from statewide business partners in key industry priority sectors and from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Our partnership continues to grow, with CEO Reed Hall now serving on the WISIS Advisory Committee and his staff working very closely with UW System to evaluate and fund matching grants for business startups and product commercialization. The final presentation was by UW River Falls Chancellor Dean Van Galen. He led a discussion that focused on undergraduate research, economic development, and innovation initiatives across a wide spectrum of high-impact practices. His co-presenters included Glenn Potts, Dean, College of Business and Economics, Scott Simpson, City Administrator for River Falls, and Shannon Zimmerman, CEO of Sagent, a global translation service based in River Falls, which is hiring a growing number of interns and UW River Falls graduates. And we didn't pass any resolutions, and thus my report is complete.
Thank you, Regent Higgins.
Thank you.
Now I'll call upon Regent Mueller, who is going to present the report of the Audit Committee and the Business and Finance Committees.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Audit Committee and the Business and Finance Committee met in joint session to hear from the Legislative Audit Bureau on 2 reports. In Chair Whitburn's absence, I chaired the joint session, and Regent Bailing chaired the Business and Finance Committee. Because he wasn't able to be here today, I'm going to report for both committees. During the joint session that I chaired, the Legislative Audit Bureau gave their briefing on 2 reports, the annual financial audit for fiscal year 2012-13 and the program audit or performance evaluation that they conducted of the human resource system. You may recall at the February board meeting we heard from our staff about both of these audits, but it is certainly a best practice on the part of audit committees to hear directly from the external auditors, and that's what we did. And the auditors gave highlights particularly of their human resource system audit. Their review criticized the UW system for implementing HRS too quickly with insufficient planning. They noted disparate business processes and lack of standardization and a high number of IT workarounds after the system went live. The Audit Bureau staff also reviewed their financial audit that I mentioned. They gave an overall summary of UW System's financial condition, gave an unmodified opinion on the accuracy of the financial statements, but raised significant concerns about a material weakness the 3rd year this has appeared related to ongoing security concerns with the HRS system. Vice President Miller responded and answered our questions. He reported the separation of duties issue, which is a key component of the security concerns. Those efforts are well underway. An external audit organization has been hired to review the system's plans to address security conflicts. And there is a very important report that's due to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee on July 1st of this year that will detail our response to the audit findings. And Senior Vice President Miller indicated that is well underway, on track to report to the legislature on July 1st. The committee then discussed revisions to the policy on program revenue balances and reserves that we spent some time talking about yesterday afternoon. The committee spent a great deal of time talking about the categories for the new fund going forward on the fund balances. They are, as we heard yesterday, obligated, planned, designated, reserves, and undocumented. That's how reserve funds will be categorized in the future. Senior Vice President Miller talked about the changes to this policy since we first approved it. They range from minor policy changes, technical changes, to additional clarification, I would say, on the 15% threshold. In the end, Vice President Miller asked that he be given additional time to determine whether a change was needed, and you do have a redraft, another redraft of the policy in your folder this morning. Essentially, it clarifies that if a fund balance exceeds the 15% threshold at an institution, the chancellor shall approve that fund balance, document it and approve it. And then, following along with the policy existing language, we eventually as a board will review the report and vote on the fund balance as well. We heard also about the projected year-end program revenue cash balance, and we discussed that in detail yesterday afternoon, so I won't go into much detail, but we got the first look at it, along with the report on budgeted to actual revenues and expenditures. Very in-depth discussion. I think it's fair to say that the committee felt there were questions on both of these new reports, but the bottom line from the committee's perspective, in my view, is that they are essential and will be very helpful in improving transparency and openness in the financial information of the university. In my view, and I think it's the consensus of the committee, we're taking important steps forward. The committee approved a change in the bylaws of the university bookstore. The bylaw revision is an organizational change from a trust indenture to the more common non-stock corporation structure. University bookstore I learned a lot about for the first time. It's a separate legal entity. It's not part of or managed by UW-Madison, but they have a historical relationship with the university, and in the interest of transparency and in honor of that history, they asked for our approval of their bylaw revision.
And they offered us a 20% discount.
Indeed. The committee heard highlights from the annual trust fund benchmarking studies. Annualized returns for the UW trust funds were reviewed and analyzed, were roughly on par with our peers, but actually exceed our peer group in the 10-year comparison. Roughly on par for 5-year, a little bit less for the 1 and 3-year. We also finally tabled action on a proposal to discuss and approve non-routine shareholder proxies for UW System Trust Fund. That has been tabled till the next meeting. So, Mr. President, in terms of our action items, on behalf of the Business and Finance Committee, I now move adoption of Resolution 12B in your folder as revised, approval of revisions to the UW System Policy on Program Revenue Balances and Reserves, and Resolution 12E, which is approval of a change in the bylaws of the University Bookstore. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We will now call upon Regent Menedis to present a report of the actions taken by the Capital Planning and Budget Committee.
Thank you, highly respected President Falbo. The Capital Planning and Budget Committee first unanimously approved the minutes from the February 2014 committee meeting, and then we heard from this campus here at River Falls, gave us a very good update on their projects that are in progress, what status they are in, and how they're proceeding and how they're going to benefit this campus community. They then walked us through their campus master plan and how that was working in conjunction with the projects they have and the projects they hope to have in the future. It was very informative. This is obviously a beautiful campus, and they're very proud of it, and they should be. We also, in addition to that presentation, had an interesting presentation led by Associate Vice President Alex Rowe, telling us about what goes into formulating a master plan for a campus. And as you might suspect, there's a lot to it. Many layers of thought and discussions go into formulating a campus's master plan, and it's something that I guess I kind of thought happened, but I really wasn't aware of the extent of the work that goes into those on the various campuses. And we heard about how they are then used for that campus for their future building projects, and how they are steered in the proper direction instead of just building things willy-nilly. You like that term? Okay, thank you. So that was very informative. There was going to be another part of the presentation about what happens after we approve these resolutions, and we hope to hear that about that in the future from Alex, and she promises us we will. We then got to the business portion of the meeting. And the first resolution is 1.3C, brought by the UW colleges, asking or requesting authority to permanently release about 3 acres from the UW Fond du Lac lease back to Fond du Lac County, so that the county can enter into a lease with a private developer to construct and operate housing facilities for students on that campus. We also heard and unanimously approved Resolution 1.3D. This was by the UW Eau Claire campus, requesting authority to amend previously approved release at the Priory to renovate space in buildings A, B, and portions of building C, which are not occupied by the highly successful Children's Center. This space requires infrastructure improvements to meet building codes, so that these can be used for dorms for, I guess, older students or students that are not freshmen and sophomore who want to live in this environment and have requested that opportunity. This will ease some of the housing shortage on that campus, which is acute at this time. The next resolution, 1.3E, is brought by the system, requesting approval of all agency maintenance and repair projects on 4 campuses with an estimated cost of approximately $8 million. These projects include exterior building repairs, space remodeling, and utility improvements which are required and needed. Resolution 1.3F, brought by UW Whitewater, who is requesting authority to build an all-sports hall to house all their trophies. I'm just kidding. UW Whitewater's requesting authority to increase the budget of the West Campus Residence Hall upgrade project by $2 million. The lowest bid for this project was almost $2 million more than the original projected budget, and that's why they're requesting this. In order to keep the project on schedule, this increase is needed, and we approve that also. President, I am requesting that resolutions 1, 3, C, D, E, and F be approved by this board.
Is there a second?
Second.
I don't think the amount that you provided Whitewater for their trophy case is enough.
I agree.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Regent Menedes. Now President Cross is going to speak to us about financial modeling changes and approaches.
Good morning again. What I hope to do in the next few minutes is to share with you format conceptual thinking, not necessarily specifics. So I don't want you to stare at the numbers. I want you to think about the concept. That's the effort. So these these issues we're dealing with break down into these 4 categories: dealing with fund balances, dealing with financial management tools, and actual input into the annual budget development process. And you heard a little bit of that from Steve yesterday. You heard a little bit on the fund balances and on the financial management tools. And then, of course, the biennial budget request. First, starting out with the fund balances, what are our overall fund balances? What balances exist in our system today, and in what funds? And I think you heard some of the confusion as we were trying to explain some of that, and then, all these different funds and categories within the funds, and then you overlay that with 2 different accounting processes, an accrual process and a modified cash process, and you begin to wonder, well, why don't these numbers match? Why don't they align? What I hope to do now is share with you some concepts and get into some of that and speak to what I consider the 2 critical issues that impacted us in the last year or 2. The first is the trend. What were the trends and how did we miss those? And secondly, what about the system-wide fund, a fund within the tuition GPR fee fund category? What about that fund? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on those 2, because repeatedly legislators tell me that those were the 2 issues that they found most troublesome, and as a chancellor, I particularly found the bottom one troubling. So I'm going to speak a little bit about those. Over the last 11 years, this is the trend line. If you smooth a line, this is what it looks like in terms of our growing fund balances. And if you look at it over that 11-year period, this is what it looks like. If you were to put a regression line through it, that's the slope of that line. It looks something like that. However, when you ask yourself the question, where is it we should be, you get 47 answers if you ask 47 people. If you ask 50, you get 50 answers. Nobody really knows what that fund balance should be. It's a guessing game, but there should be some rationale as to where it is, where it should be, and how we get there. If you simply take a 10% number of $6 billion, you end up with if I can find it, you end up with the lower line there is $600 million, the dotted line. The upper line is $900 million. That'd be 15% of $6 billion. Is that the right thing to do? Not necessarily. I just threw it up there so you have a point of reference. In fact, I would argue that those are management tools more than they are caps, limitations either way. If you then do a regression line through only the changes, and you only extend it out a few years, you can see the slope of that line is going down. And is that the intended target? Maybe, maybe not. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to start to break down those surpluses, starting with those first couple of years and then extrapolating from that. So if you look at these numbers, 2012 to 2013 to 2014, those 2 years were pretty close in terms of what those actual numbers are. How much of that is obligated as defined by the Legislative Audit Bureau? And how might that slide forward? And where does that put us if we continue to spend at that rate in an obligated category? And that's a question. It's just a concept at this point. If you add to that our planned spending as documented in clear documentation, yet this puts us down in this range. And of course, the earlier, I'm trying to get the laser to work. Here it goes. The early 2 years from this period to this period, this is pretty accurate right here, these first 2 years over here. But once you get beyond that, it's just an extrapolation. So just remember that. In addition to the planned, we also have designated. And at that point, of course, designated means that it's source defined. You can't spend it on something other than the source it was defined for. And if you'll notice, that actually puts us down somewhere close to the 200 million category before you get to actual reserves. So obligated, planned, and designated, if you take those categories and you take them off from the fund balances that we have, do we really have that much money, or is it in reserves? Is it all planned, designated, or obligated? And then there's another category that's quite interesting, undocumented. And if you'll notice that we're already seeing this in the first cycle, there was quite a bit of undocumented money. But after the first year, that dropped really fast. Everybody was documenting that. This is going for some purpose. And I would argue that most of that should be in reserves anyway. So that's probably a fair statement. So as you can see, when you put it into those four classifications, that gives you an idea of what we really have and what's committed in terms of obligated, planned, or designated, and what's set aside for reserves. And, of course, the dashed line shows that 600 million mark. The other item that I wanted to mention is within the tuition portion of that, one fund, I wanted to look at the system-wide piece. Now, this is the fund balance in the tuition category for 2013, fiscal 13. The red is fiscal 13. The blue is fiscal 14. Campus by campus. So you can see between 2013 and 2014 the kind of changes that have occurred on each of those campuses. And I want to draw your attention, if I can, to this particular category. This is the system-wide fund, which was at 2012 it was about 128 million, and it grew to 151 million in 2013, and that was a very troubling item in and of itself. As a chancellor, I found that troubling. Well, we are spending that down to 76 million. We project we'll be at 76, and I believe we will be under 50 rather soon. That's whether it's by the end of this year or not, I don't know yet. But that significant drop in the system-wide fund, I think, is important. Some of the tools you've been looking at, this budget versus actual on a quarterly basis. You should receive this in October, at the end of the second quarter, at the end of the third quarter, which essentially is what you're looking at today. We need to refine it a little bit so it's cleaner, clearer, and easier for everybody to understand. But it's broken down by fund. So at the top is the tuition fund, and then you run into the auxiliary fund. Then, of course, gifts and grants, which is difficult, but we wanted to put all of it in there. General operations, and then other, which is mostly straight pass-through money. And when you look at this number down at the bottom, that should match or be very close to the Red Book number, so you can see this is the total budget we're looking at and that you're looking at the same time, and what are the pieces that go into it. If I may, I'd like to jump to another tool that we are developing. We have not created it yet, and we're working on it. And it may not look quite like this. This is, if I can get it to work, this is an example. We have carefully used the phrasing projecting as opposed to forecasting, using a mathematical linear regression, if you will, or simply following that pattern from previous years. In the future, we must find a way to forecast more accurately within at least a plus or minus 5% range. And in creating tools that allow us to maintain that and look at it on a regular basis in collaboration with the CBOs from each of the campuses will be really important to the board. And I'll explain why here in a moment. I think most of you obviously see that, but let me share that in another in another way in a moment. In addition, you will see more dashboards, indicators of this is what it looks like. Is there a problem there? And then you dive into the problem if the dashboard indicates it warrants a dive. In addition to that, the whole annual budget development process, this is the way it used to be, only working from the previous year's. This is one of the few things on the River Falls campus that doesn't work that well. Everything else works really well. So this little red dot up here on the top, only in the past, all we did was provide the new budget data based on the old information. And of course, now we're adding projected actuals because we won't actually have the actuals, but we will project those as well as the fund balances. So when the board approves an annual budget, these pieces and what is in each of those funds will be available to the board. And now a little bit about the forecasting processes and why that's important. We have typically worked in narrow slices of time, 1 or 2 years. And in looking at our budget data or our financial data in 1 or 2 year slices of time, you don't get to see what's really going on. As you can see, you only see portions of it. Now, I'm not trying to abandon the 1 or 2 year piece. I'm simply saying that needs to be complemented with a longer perspective. And had we been looking at this more carefully over a longer period of time, we might have seen that the slope of that line changed significantly. We would have captured that snapshot. So in the process of going forward, thanks. In the process of going forward, how do we look at a greater slice in time? And looking at 6 years, 5 years, a longer period of time, what do we project our fund balance will be? Where will it be? And in what categories will it be in the future? And what are the components that go into that? And how do we help then make decisions about a given year or a given 2 year period based on our projections that I'm going to soon start calling forecast? And that to me is an important part of this. What are the components that go into that? Well, obviously fund balances, where are they and in what categories do they exist? What are our enrollment projections? What do we know about where our enrollment is going and what must we guess in respect to that? In addition, what are our tuition projections? What are our projected expenditures? Are they growing? In what areas, and how does that fit into this? In respect to that, what about our general program revenues? How does that fit into this piece? And then, of course, initiatives or other funding issues. These pieces all interact in a way that allow us to more effectively project where we're going to be and see how that fund balance piece fits into that. So in conclusion, these are the outcomes and the messages that I want you to walk away from this with. Hopefully, you continue to see openness and transparency, that you see disaggregation of financial data, so it's disaggregated and reaggregated, new financial management tools that allow you to look at this in different ways. You're seeing more inputs into the annual budget development process, a longer view of financial trends, and a better understanding of the organization's fiscal position. And finally, no surprises. There shouldn't be any surprises to the board, and particularly in the financial arena. So that's our goal, and those are the messages that I hope you take away from this. And I'll sit back.
Any questions, discussion? Jose?
Not a question, but maybe a comment. And
Let me start with an experience that I had many, many years ago. I served in a board of directors of a hospital, and one of the takeaways that I had from that experience was to learn that a hospital was first and foremost a business. And as a board member, every month that we met, we would get almost a 2-inch volume of information that the hospital could literally track every single Band-Aid, every single pill, every single injection, all the way through. And what was a little bit disconcerting for me was that patient care was almost like the last few minutes of the board discussion as we were rushing to finish the board meeting. And while I want to compliment President Cross for his very, very good presentation, and I'm glad you're taking us down this way, I would hope that in the end we don't forget that we are about students and quality education and not just being able to document where every single piece of chalk and board and sidewalk and how often we cut the grass and how much it's costing us. In our zeal and desire and I think importance in being transparent, that we are first and foremost about educating students and graduating students. And I want to compliment you for this excellent work that you're doing. I also want to state this, that as we move forward in this need to be even more transparent, because I do believe we have been transparent, but in this need to be more transparent, one of the things that I've learned about this system is that let's put it up front. It is a complex, very, very complex organization. And that I hope that in our need or feeling that we are compelled to have to bring it all down to one-page dashboard, that we don't lose something. That there may be some times when you have to explain a very, very complex system or financials here that may require more than the one-page dashboard, and that we may need to help others understand that you cannot bring it down to that one-page document, because in doing that we may oversimplify a tremendous amount of work and struggle and challenges that our administrators are having to deal with just so that we can make it look like a one-page document. And so those, as I said, it's not as much a question, it's just a prior experience I had and just an observation. But again, I want to compliment President Cross for the excellent presentation, and that I'm sure you're going to find that balance to keep us on the straight and narrow, about not forgetting that we are about educating students.
We do our best.
Regent Farrell?
I guess before your terrific analysis and presentation, there's a news flash from WISPOL saying we have $1 billion surplus. What I think we ought to do in all sincerity is take this whole issue, and especially as you've designed it, and have any journalism or communication area, department, or discipline in our system, use this as a case study. How would you write this story properly and understand the financial background of it and not misrepresent it? They're headlining it with the wrong headline. They're minimizing it to the wrong issue. It's not about the $1 billion. It's about the way you clarified it. Your various graphs were just, if they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, it's more than that. I think truly, I mean that all with sincerity, there's no more complex a story or important a story, as Jose just said, to really understand. And I think they ought to use it as a case study. I truly mean that, because maybe some of the journalists going out the door will know better what they're talking about when they write these stories, and they're not doing it right now. And I want to compliment you on what has evolved since I've been on this board. I can't tell you how impressed I am with this, because you're already living up to the commitment you made to us when you took this weight on your shoulders, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Faldo. I've got kind of a granular question to start. On slide 13, you were talking about the system-wide budget projections and us spending down from roughly 151 to 76 with a goal towards 50 in a relatively short period of time. I think that's important for us to be doing. President Cross, can you give us a sense, just in the aggregate, of what we're spending down on? Are we spending that wisely? Are we spending it thoughtfully? That's my first question.
I'm going to defer that question to David or Steve, so they'll get ready. But before you go ahead, David. Before they answer, the premise in your comment I really appreciate. One of the messages I think we have to take away from this is that we are not wildly spending this down, or to use Regent Manny Deed's point here earlier, willy-nilly trying to make ourselves look good by spending the money down inappropriately. We're trying to thoughtfully, diligently, and ethically spend this down in a careful manner that is appropriate with our plans, not just to make us look good.
Thank you, Regent Peterson. That was a specified expenditure required by the biennial budget. You might recall the legislature's intent was that specific expenditures such as the first-year funding of HEAB of $60 million, approximately $59 million, come from system-wide and be transferred. We've made that transfer. Other lapses in the first year of the biennium were specified to come from system-wide. We've made those. We've reported that to the Joint Finance Committee, and they've approved that reallocation report. What President Cross was referring to, further drawdowns, is it's a biennial budget, and we're midway through. There's further expenditures from that are part of the biennial budget in the second year that will also come from there. And then the remaining balance funds ongoing system-wide costs, those costs that are shared by all institutions, such as veterans, tuition remission, utilities, and so forth, that we pay out of system-wide. So that's how that account is being managed.
My second comment just has to do with the conclusion of this report, which talks about outcomes, messages. I think the overarching umbrella that we need to keep in mind is active communications, not only with legislative leadership, as Regent Farrow discussed yesterday, and I had an opportunity to talk with Senator Harsdorf about, and the necessity of us doing that, but also with, the citizens of our state. This is a highly complex area for us. There's been tremendous work effort that has gone into this by system staff, by chief budget officers and others, and we don't want to dilute that work, but we have to make this transparent to folks. I share some of Regent Vasquez's concerns that we want to simplify this down to a one-pager, but I want to make sure that not only all of us as regents understand this, but that the legislature understands this and the general public understands this. This is the biggest issue we face. We're deploying tremendous resources to solve it. We need to accelerate that till we feel confident that everybody has a full picture of how we're trying to do this and do it well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regent Milner.
Well, thank you, Regent Peterson. You asked my question, and David answered it. So I would like to just make a comment about this. Echo both Regent Farrow and Regent Peterson's comment about getting the message out, getting this message out. But also, I'd like to respond to the thought of our primary mission is educating the students, the citizens in this state. But our job as regents on a governing board is to manage wisely. We must manage wisely to do good. I learned that I've sat on many large and small nonprofit boards, and the bottom line is we all go into, I am here not because I wanted to financially manage this. I am here because I care about higher education. I care about the students and the citizens in this state. It's important personally to me, and it's important to all of us. But to do that job for those citizens and for those students and for those young people, we need to manage wisely. And so we cannot forget that. We'll never forget our primary mission, but we cannot forget that overarching responsibility.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Regent Cross? Regent. President Cross.
For promoting. Earlier this morning, just a short while ago, the governor announced that he intends to freeze tuition for 2 more years. And our goal is to work with him to help him understand our situation and to work with the legislature in this process. We're hopeful that over the coming year we can help a lot of folks, including legislators and the governor's office, understand our financial situation better. And I intend to work at that very vigorously. So I wanted to announce that, and we can look at this as a partnership with the legislature and the governor's office. Let's work together to find a reasonable solution. And I hope that the board will work with me and the chancellors and the faculty and staff to find a way to partner over the next year so that we can get the best budget possible for the university.
Does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Thank you. The agenda indicates that we would recognize Regent Drew at this meeting, but he had an unanticipated work conflict, so we will save his whereases for June. I would now call upon Regent Bradley to read the resolution of appreciation to UW River Falls for hosting the April meeting.
Thank you, President Falbo. 2 things that most successful organizations are able to communicate clearly to their employees and also to the people that they provide their goods or services to are what defines the organization and what are the aspirations that its leaders have for the future. And I think that we've seen over the last 2 days that Chancellor Van Galen and his administrative team are accomplishing both. I would also say that if I were a prospective student, whether I was coming out of high school or returning from the military or just leaving a job, I would be very attracted to a university community that has coalesced behind initiatives of being global, innovative, and excellent. So I'm very pleased as the campus liaison for UW River Falls to present this resolution to that campus community. Whereas the members of the Board of Regents are pleased to recognize the University of Wisconsin-River Falls as the official host campus for the board's April meeting, whereas the board is grateful for the generous hospitality extended this month by Chancellor Van Galen and the entire UW River Falls community, and whereas the board appreciated the opportunity to visit the Hudson Center, an education center designed specifically for the needs of adult students, and enjoyed the reception held there co-hosted by local legislators, and whereas the board applauds UW River Falls' strategic efforts to pursue a pathway to distinction in the St. Croix Valley. And whereas UW River Falls has offered the board useful insights during a presentation by Provost Fernando Delgado on the university's important efforts to build partnerships with non-traditional students, and Chancellor Dean Van Galen's discussion of the ties among UW River Falls' undergraduate research, economic development, and business outreach activities. And whereas UW River Falls is taking an active approach to improving agriculture in the region with its River Falls Farm Master Plan, be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents hereby thanks UW River Falls for this month's informative presentations, its forward-thinking spirit, and its many continued contributions to the UW system and to the state of Wisconsin. Dean Van Galen, would you please come and accept the resolution and offer your closing comments. On behalf of the board, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the thoughtful resolution and for your presence here in River Falls. I hope you enjoyed your time. I hope that you enjoyed learning more about what we're doing here at the university. I certainly want to thank the entire campus community. As you know, organizing, planning these events are a bit of an effort, and so many people on this campus have stepped up. I especially want to acknowledge the planning committee chaired by Katie Coots. Is she here? No, she's probably out working and getting lunch ready. Diane Monteith, Blake Fry, Deb Martin, Mike Stifter, and not to forget anyone, Melissa Wilson. So that was the planning team. They've done a great job. And one other thing I wanted to mention, there have been some inquiries about Falcon Foods cheese and the ability to purchase that. So our Falcon Foods store will be open today until 4 o'clock. And I think we have some maps and directions to get you there if you'd like to purchase any more cheese. And I also think there are some gift boxes for the Regents that are awaiting in the back of the room that include Regents. So enjoy, and it's been great to have you here. Safe travels home.
We were honored some of us to have breakfast with students this morning, and it was a great experience. But I did do a kind of a informal poll while I was at that breakfast, and asking the students what they thought of their chancellor. And there were 6 students, and they basically didn't know they had a chancellor. Now, that wouldn't have, if that wasn't bad enough, he was sitting with us. Thank you. You've done a tremendous job. I really enjoyed the students this morning, and they have a great sense of humor to go with their hard work. I think President Cross has something more he'd like to say.
Yes, I have to get ready for it. You caught me by surprise.
I'm sorry. It's in the script.
I know.
You want this one?
Yeah, that's You may have heard about the sudden death of Jim Mifalszewski. I really don't know how to pronounce his last name. I never have. It's always been sort of a joke. Jim, who was the state director for the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center, he collapsed last week while working out at the Surf in Madison and was pronounced dead at the hospital. He was 37 years old, with a daughter that was a couple of years old, and he had just moved from Eau Claire to Madison. He was on the Eau Claire campus. He was doing a really great job, and his obituary said that he would walk into a room and the room would light up simply because of his infectious personality. The world was a better place simply because he was a part of it, and I can say, having known this young man, I agree. Our sincere condolences to his family, his friends, and his colleagues, and this is a huge loss. And today we're all looking at the world through the eyes of a 2-year-old girl. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. And I guess we are fortunate that he made the world a better place.
That's right.
Are there any other communications, petitions, or memorials? Okay. Thank you all. It's been a great 2 days. Good to see you all again, and we'll see you in Milwaukee in May. June. Safe travels. Thank you.